My name is Sophia Williams, and at 26 years old, I watched my parents present my little sister Megan with the keys to a brand new BMW, complete with an enormous red bow. Minutes later, they handed me a card containing exactly $2. After years of being treated like the family afterthought, that moment crystallized everything. Which is why, at exactly 2 a.m. that night, I quietly executed the plan I'd been too afraid to follow through with for years. I left and blocked them all. Before I tell you how I finally stood up for myself, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt invisible in your own family. Growing up in suburban Connecticut, I had what looked like the perfect American family from the outside. My father, Thomas Williams, was a successful orthopedic surgeon at the regional medical center, while my mother Linda maintained a thriving practice as a corporate attorney. We lived in a beautiful colonial-style home with a sprawling backyard, took annual vacations to destinations most kids only dreamed about, and never wanted for material things. At least, that's what everyone else saw. What they didn't see were the constant, subtle ways my parents made it clear that my younger sister Megan was the true priority in our family. Megan came along 3 years after I was born, and from the moment she arrived, there was a shift in our family dynamic that I was too young to understand but old enough to feel. My earliest birthday memory isn't my own celebration, but standing quietly at age 6 while everyone fussed over Megan's 3rd birthday. My parents had hired a princess character, brought in a petting zoo, and invited what seemed like half the neighborhood. My own birthday the month before had been a simple family dinner with a store-bought cake. When I asked my mother about it later, she gently explained, "Megan needs more attention, sweetie. She's younger and more sensitive than you. You're our strong girl who doesn't need all that fuss." And just like that, a pattern was established. I was the strong one who didn't need things, while Megan was delicate and required special care. Christmas mornings meant Megan receiving the latest toys and gadgets while I got practical items like clothes or books. When report cards came, my straight A's were expected and received with brief nods, while Megan's C+ grades were celebrated with dinner out because she tried so hard. I threw myself into academics, thinking that maybe if I achieved enough, they would finally notice me. In middle school, I won the state science fair with a project on renewable energy. My parents couldn't attend because Megan had a dance recital the same day. "You understand, don't you, Sophia? You're so independent, and this means everything to your sister," my father said, not quite meeting my eyes as he handed me $20 to take a taxi home from the competition. High school brought more of the same. I joined every club I could, became captain of the debate team, maintained perfect grades, and even started volunteering at the local animal shelter. Not because I was passionate about all these things, though some I truly loved, but because I was desperately trying to be seen by my own parents. The culmination of my high school career should have been a moment of pride. I was named valedictorian of my class, an achievement that had required 4 years of relentless work. The night before graduation, I overheard my parents planning an elaborate graduation party for Megan, who was finishing her freshman year with passing grades, a significant improvement from her middle school performance. "Shouldn't we do something for Sophia too?" my mother asked, almost as an afterthought. "We're taking her to dinner after the ceremony," my father replied. "Besides, this is a big deal for Megan. You know how much she struggles. Sophia's always been fine on her own." I stood frozen in the hallway, my carefully written valedictorian speech clutched in my hand, tears threatening to spill. The next day, I delivered that speech to a packed auditorium, speaking about perseverance and finding your own path. My parents arrived just as I was stepping up to the podium and left immediately after to prepare for Megan's celebration. That night, while Megan's party raged downstairs with relatives, friends, and neighbors all congratulating her on making it through the year, I sat alone in my room revising my college application essays. A part of me still held on to hope that things would change, that my parents would eventually see me. Another part was beginning to realize that I needed to create a life where I didn't need their validation to feel worthy. What I didn't understand then was that the patterns established in our childhood would only grow stronger as we entered adulthood, and that the disparity in how we were treated would eventually reach a breaking point that even my well-practiced emotional armor couldn't withstand. When my acceptance letter from Stanford University arrived, I sprinted into the house, letter clutched tightly in my hand, heart pounding with excitement. This was it, the culmination of all my hard work, my ticket to independence, and maybe, finally, something that would make my parents proud. My mother was in the kitchen preparing dinner, and my father was reviewing medical journals at the table. Megan was nowhere to be seen, probably at one of her friends' houses. "Mom, Dad, I got in," I announced, trying to keep my voice steady despite my excitement. "Full academic scholarship to Stanford." My mother looked up briefly from the vegetables she was chopping. "That's nice, honey. Can you set the table?" My father glanced at the letter. "Stanford's expensive, even with a scholarship. You know we're saving for Megan's education since she won't qualify for academic money." And just like that, my moment was over. No celebration, no proud hugs, just a reminder that even my achievements were secondary to Megan's future needs. That fall, I moved across the country to California with 2 suitcases and whatever I could fit in my beat-up Honda Civic, a 16th birthday present that had been Megan's first, then handed down to me when they bought her a newer model for her own 16th birthday. The contrast between my college experience and Megan's couldn't have been more stark. While I worked 3 part-time jobs, barista in the morning, library assistant during the day, and waitressing on weekends. Megan attended the state university with a fully paid tuition, apartment, meal plan, and monthly allowance. During our rare phone calls, my parents would mention how they'd just sent Megan money for a spring break trip or bought her a new laptop because school is so stressful for her. Meanwhile, I was living on ramen and coffee, sleeping 5 hours a night, and maintaining a 3.9 GPA while working nearly 40 hours a week. When my ancient laptop died during finals week of my sophomore year, I had to borrow money from my roommate to buy a refurbished one. But college also brought unexpected gifts, true friendship. My roommate Ashley became the sister I'd never really had. She noticed when I was pushing myself too hard and made sure I occasionally had fun. Jordan from my economics class and Zach from the campus newspaper became my study partners and confidants. For the first time, I had people in my life who celebrated my successes and supported me through difficulties. Then came Daniel. We met in a comparative literature class junior year. I was taking it as an elective, he was an English major. After partnering for a project, we started dating, and for the first time, I experienced what it felt like to be someone's priority. Daniel came from a family where celebrations were loud, love was openly expressed, and achievements, big or small, were acknowledged. The first time he took me home for a weekend, I nearly cried when his parents made a special dinner just because I'd gotten an internship. It was such a foreign experience to be fussed over, to have someone say, "We're so proud of you," without it being followed by a comparison to someone else. "Is something wrong with the food?" Daniel's mother asked when she noticed my eyes welling up. "No, it's perfect," I managed. "I'm just not used to this kind of attention." Later that night, Daniel held me while I cried and explained my family dynamic for the first time. "That's not normal, Sophia," he said gently. "That's not how parents are supposed to treat their children." His words were the first crack in the foundation of normality I'd built around my family's behavior. At Daniel's suggestion, I started seeing a therapist through the university's counseling center. Dr. Reynolds introduced me to concepts like golden child and scapegoat dynamics in families. She helped me understand that the constant disparity wasn't because Megan was more deserving or I was less worthy, it was a dysfunctional family system that had nothing to do with either of our inherent values. "But they're not abusive," I protested during one session. "They never hit me or called me names." "Emotional neglect is also harmful, Sophia," Dr. Reynolds explained. "Being consistently overlooked and having your emotional needs ignored causes real damage, even if there are no bruises to show for it." Holidays became increasingly difficult. Each time I flew home, paying for my own tickets while my parents covered Megan's, the contrast between our treatment became more glaring. Christmas my junior year, Megan received a new iPhone, designer clothes, and a promise for a spring break trip to Paris. I received a generic sweater and gift card to a bookstore. "You're always reading anyway," my mother said, as though justifying the disparity. That same visit, I overheard my parents discussing helping Megan buy a car because parking on campus is such a hassle for her. When I mentioned that I was struggling with my old Honda's increasing repair bills, my father suggested I take better care of it or use public transportation instead. By senior year, I had begun setting firmer boundaries. I stopped coming home for short breaks, using work as an excuse. I limited phone calls to once a week and kept conversations superficial. My real family was becoming the one I had chosen. Ashley, Daniel, Jordan, and Zach, people who valued me for who I was. When graduation approached, I wasn't surprised when my parents informed me they'd only be able to attend the main ceremony, not my department's special recognition event where I was receiving an award, because they needed to get back for one of Megan's sorority functions. They arrived as the general ceremony began, barely made it through the obligatory photos, and were checking their watches by the time my friends were organizing a celebration dinner. "We really need to hit the road," my father said, handing me a card. "Congratulations, sweetheart. We're very proud." The card contained a generic graduation message and a check for $500, a generous gift by normal standards, but I knew Megan had received a week-long vacation for completing her sophomore year with a 2.7 GPA. As I watched their car pull away, Ashley put her arm around me. "Your real family is here now," she said, gesturing to our friends waiting at the restaurant. "The people who choose to celebrate you." She was right. I was building a life where I was valued, but the pull of wanting my parents' approval was still there, a quiet ache beneath my growing independence. After graduation, I accepted a marketing position at a tech startup in San Francisco. The salary wasn't impressive, but the growth potential was, and most importantly, it was mine, achieved without connections or parental guidance. Ashley and I found a modest two-bedroom apartment in Oakland that stretched our budgets but gave us independence. We painted the walls ourselves, furnished it with thrift store finds and hand-me-downs from her older siblings, and created a space that felt like home. Meanwhile, Megan dropped out of college halfway through her junior year, deciding it wasn't her thing. Instead of the consequences most young adults would face, my parents bought her a condo in our hometown and set her up with a monthly allowance while she figured things out. They even hired a career counselor to help her discover her passion. When I called home and mentioned the long hours I was putting in at the startup, my mother's response was, "That's nice, dear. Did you hear Megan's thinking about opening a boutique? Your father's helping her with the business plan." The disparity continued at family gatherings. At Thanksgiving that year, the conversation revolved around Megan's potential business venture, with only passing questions about my work. When I mentioned my first successful marketing campaign that had increased our clients' engagement by 40%, my father nodded absently while serving Megan another portion of pie. "Your sister might need some help with her business plan," he said to me later. "You're good with that sort of thing." This became another pattern. While my parents invested thousands in Megan's ever-changing ventures, they saw me primarily as a resource to help her. I was asked to review her business proposals, help with her resume when she briefly considered getting a job, and even lend her money once when she overspent her allowance before a vacation. The breaking point for this phase came when I received a promotion to senior marketing strategist after only 18 months at the company. It was a significant achievement that came with a substantial raise and team leadership responsibilities. I called my parents, allowing myself to hope once more that this might be the achievement that finally registered. "That's wonderful timing," my mother said after a brief congratulation. "Megan just met someone, and we think he might be serious. We're having a family dinner next weekend to meet him. Could you fly in? It would mean so much to your sister." The promotion wasn't mentioned again. That weekend, I spent $800 on a last-minute flight, only to sit through an entire dinner where the conversation centered exclusively on Megan and her new boyfriend Tyler, a real estate agent with great potential according to my father. When Tyler asked what I did for work, I began explaining my role, only to have my mother interrupt to pass Megan's childhood photo album to him. "Sophia always was our serious one," she said with a laugh. "Always working, this one." That night, lying in my childhood bedroom, I stared at the ceiling and finally allowed myself to acknowledge what my therapist, friends, and even Daniel had been suggesting: this wasn't going to change. No achievement, no milestone, no success would ever be enough to make my parents see me as they saw Megan. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I confronted them directly. Sitting at the breakfast table while Megan was still asleep, I calmly explained how their differential treatment had affected me throughout my life. "I feel like nothing I do is ever good enough," I concluded, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. "I'm not asking for special treatment, just equal consideration." My parents exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of surprise and discomfort. "Sophia, you've always been so independent and capable," my mother said eventually. "Megan needs more support, you know that." "You've always been jealous of your sister," my father added, his tone hardening. "We thought you'd have outgrown that by now. This is exactly why we treat you differently. You're too sensitive and turn everything into a competition." And there it was, the gaslighting that Dr. Reynolds had warned me about. My legitimate concerns weren't just dismissed, they were twisted to make me the problem. I was too sensitive for noticing the disparity, jealous for wanting equal treatment, and somehow both too independent and too needy simultaneously. I cut my visit short, claiming a work emergency, and returned to San Francisco feeling both devastated and strangely liberated. The conversation had confirmed what I'd been reluctant to accept. My parents weren't oblivious to the disparity, they were actively justifying it. That Thanksgiving, against my better judgment, I agreed to host the family at my apartment in Oakland. I spent days cleaning, decorating, and preparing a feast that stretched my budget and my tiny kitchen to their limits. Ashley graciously stayed with her boyfriend to give my family space. I cooked for 3 days straight: turkey, homemade stuffing, 5 side dishes, and 3 pies, all from scratch. When my family arrived, my mother immediately noted the smallness of my apartment while my father commented on the questionable neighborhood. Megan spent most of the visit on her phone. After the meal, which received only perfunctory compliments, my mother turned to Megan and said, "Wasn't it sweet of your sister to try so hard? Maybe next year we'll do it properly at home." That night, after they left, I sat among the dishes and leftover food and finally allowed myself to cry. Ashley found me there when she returned and silently helped me clean up. "You know you can choose not to do this to yourself, right?" she said gently. "You're allowed to protect yourself, even from family." After that, I began deliberately limiting contact. I stopped initiating calls, made myself busy for most holidays, and when we did speak, kept conversations brief and superficial. I created a new pattern of engagement on my terms, one where I wasn't constantly seeking approval that would never come. But a small part of me still hoped. Still wanted. Still believed that somehow, some way, they might see me. That hope was about to be completely extinguished. By an accident of timing, Megan and I were born just 3 years and 2 days apart. Throughout our childhood, this had resulted in joint birthday celebrations that invariably became showcases for Megan, with my birthday as an afterthought. As adults, we'd fallen into a pattern of a shared family dinner near our birth dates whenever I was in town. This year, my 27th birthday and Megan's 24th fell on a weekend, and my mother insisted it was the perfect opportunity for a proper celebration. Despite my reservations, I agreed to fly home, partly out of that lingering hope that things might be different and partly because I'd recently ended things with Daniel after he took a job in Seattle. I was feeling vulnerable and, despite everything, craving the comfort of family, even my dysfunctional one. When I arrived at my parents' house that Saturday afternoon, I was surprised by the elaborate decorations. Balloons and streamers adorned the entryway, and through the window, I could see that the backyard had been transformed with string lights, floral arrangements, and a long table set for what appeared to be at least 20 guests. "Mom?" I called, wheeling my small suitcase into the foyer. "This looks amazing." My mother emerged from the kitchen, looking flustered but excited. Sophia. You're early. We weren't expecting you for another hour. My flight got in ahead of schedule. Can I help with anything? No, everything's under control. Your father's picking up the cake, and the caterers are handling the food. Why don't you go freshen up? Your old room is ready. As I climbed the stairs, I heard my mother on the phone. She's here already. Yes, everything's ready for the surprise. No, she doesn't suspect a thing. A surprise? For me? A flutter of hope rose in my chest. Maybe they had finally recognized how they'd treated me all these years. Maybe this elaborate setup was their way of making amends. Maybe things were finally going to change. I took extra care getting ready, choosing the dress I'd packed carefully and spending time on my hair and makeup. By the time I came downstairs, guests were beginning to arrive. Family, friends, relatives, even a few of my high school acquaintances I hadn't seen in years. Everyone was dressed up, adding to the sense of occasion. The caterers were setting out an impressive spread, and champagne was being poured. My father, looking distinguished in a blazer, greeted me with a brief hug. Happy birthday, Sophia. You look nice. Thanks, Dad. This is a lot. I gestured to the elaborate setup. He smiled, a hint of excitement in his eyes I hadn't seen directed at me before. Well, it's a special day. As more guests arrived, I found myself enjoying the attention and warm wishes. Perhaps I had misjudged the situation. Perhaps my parents had finally realized what they'd been doing all these years. Around 6 o'clock, my mother called for everyone's attention, clinking a spoon against her champagne glass. Thank you all for coming to this very special celebration, she began, smiling widely. As you know, we're here to celebrate birthdays. Both Sophia's 27th and Megan's 24th. I hadn't seen Megan yet and glanced around, wondering where she was. But, my mother continued, we also have a surprise announcement. My father moved to stand beside her, adding, Megan has recently been accepted into the executive training program at Anderson Consulting, and we couldn't be prouder of her for finally finding her path. This was news to me. Last I'd heard, Megan was still exploring her options while working part-time at a friend's boutique. To celebrate this milestone, we have a special gift, my mother said. Megan, come on out. The sliding glass door to the patio opened, and Megan appeared, beaming. Behind her in the driveway sat a brand-new white BMW convertible with an enormous red bow on the hood. A collective gasp went up from the guests, followed by applause. Oh my God! Megan squealed, rushing to the car. Is this really mine? My parents nodded, clearly delighted by her reaction. You've worked so hard, my father said, handing her the keys. And you'll need reliable transportation for your new job. The guests crowded around Megan and the car, exclaiming over the leather interior and high-tech features. I stood frozen on the patio, the champagne in my hand suddenly tasting bitter. This wasn't a dual celebration at all. This was, as always, Megan's show. After several minutes of admiring the car, everyone returned to the party. The conversation now revolved entirely around Megan's new job opportunity and her beautiful new car. My birthday was not mentioned again. As dinner was winding down, my mother approached me with a small envelope. Happy birthday, honey, she said, handing it to me before being pulled away by an aunt wanting to discuss the cake. I opened the envelope to find a generic birthday card with cartoonish balloons on the front. Inside, my parents had written, Happy 27th, Sophia. Wishing you all the best. Love, Mom and Dad. Taped to the inside was a $2 bill. A $2 bill. While Megan got a luxury car that probably cost close to $60,000. I stared at the bill, memories flooding back of every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone where the disparity between how we were treated had been made painfully clear. But this was beyond anything they'd done before. This wasn't just favoring Megan, this was a deliberate statement about my worth in their eyes. $2. Not even enough for a coffee. I carefully replaced the bill in the card and tucked it into my purse, maintaining the pleasant expression I'd perfected over years of similar disappointments. But inside, something had finally broken. The last thread of hope that things might change, that they might someday see me, snapped. When the birthday cake was brought out, white chocolate for Megan, despite my lifelong preference for dark chocolate, I smiled and sang along with everyone else. When Megan opened a pile of additional gifts while I received none, I nodded appreciatively at her expressions of delight. And when my father raised a toast to our daughters on their special day, only to launch into a 3-minute speech about how proud he was of Megan's new job opportunity, I clinked my glass with the others and took a sip of champagne. But I had already made my decision. This would be the last time they would have the opportunity to make me feel invisible. Around 9, I excused myself, claiming an early flight the next day. This was a lie, my actual return flight wasn't until Sunday evening. But I couldn't bear another moment of the celebration. "Leaving so soon?" my mother asked as I gathered my things. "Yes, I have meetings first thing Monday I need to prepare for," I lied smoothly. "Well, it was nice you could come," she said, patting my arm distractedly before turning to greet another guest. No one walked me out. As I closed the front door behind me, I could hear the party continuing uninterrupted, as though my departure had gone completely unnoticed, which it probably had. In the quiet of my old Honda, I sat for a moment, the engine off, staring at my parents' beautifully lit house. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. Inside was warmth, celebration, and family focused on Megan. Outside in the darkness sat the afterthought daughter with her $2 birthday gift. I started the car and drove to the hotel I'd booked earlier that day, another lie I'd told, claiming I was staying with a local friend to avoid awkward questions about why I wasn't staying in my childhood home. Alone in my sterile hotel room, I finally let the mask drop. The tears came in waves, not just for today's humiliation but for a lifetime of similar moments. For the child who'd tried so hard to be seen. For the teenager who'd achieved excellence only to be overlooked. For the adult who still, somehow, kept hoping for a different ending to the same story. By midnight, the tears had stopped, replaced by a clarity I'd never experienced before. This wasn't about being the victim anymore. This was about choosing myself, finally and completely. I picked up my phone and texted Ashley, "It happened again. Worse than ever. I'm done." Her response came seconds later, "What do you need?" "To make a clean break," I replied. "No more half measures." "About time," she texted back. "Call me when you get home." "Whatever you need, I'm here." I set my alarm for 1:30 a.m. and tried to sleep, knowing that when I woke up, I would be taking the first steps toward a different life, one where I no longer waited for approval that would never come. The harsh buzz of my alarm jolted me awake at 1:30 a.m. For a moment, I was disoriented in the unfamiliar hotel room, but then the events of the evening came rushing back, the BMW with its ostentatious red bow, the adoring celebration of Megan's accomplishments, and the final insult of the $2 bill casually taped inside a generic card. I sat up and switched on the bedside lamp, my mind surprisingly clear despite the emotional turbulence of the day. This clarity wasn't new, it had been building for years, through countless therapy sessions, conversations with friends who actually valued me, and moments of painful self-reflection. What was new was the absolute certainty that things would never change, and more importantly, that I deserved better. With shaking hands, I reached for my phone and called Ashley. Despite the late hour, she answered on the second ring, her voice alert. "I'm here. Are you okay?" "No," I admitted. "But I think I will be." I proceeded to tell her everything about the party, my voice breaking only when I described the $2 bill. "Those bastards," Ashley hissed. "Sophia, this is beyond favoritism. This is cruelty." "I know," I said, and for perhaps the first time, I truly did know. "I can't do this anymore. I'm going to cut contact with them. Completely." "Are you sure?" Ashley's voice was gentle but serious. "I 100% support you, but I want to make sure you've thought this through. This is a big step." I'd been thinking about it for years, I confessed. I just kept hoping something would change. Today made it clear nothing ever will. I don't even think they see what they're doing, and that's almost worse. They genuinely believe I deserve less. You deserve everything, Ashley said fiercely. A family that celebrates you. People who see your worth. Love that doesn't come with conditions or comparisons. We talked for nearly an hour, reviewing the pattern of behavior that had defined my family relationships. Ashley listened, asked thoughtful questions, and never once suggested I was overreacting, a stark contrast to how my parents dismissed my feelings. I'm going to call Dr. Reynolds, I said finally. I know it's the middle of the night, but I need to process this with her before I make my final decision. Good idea. Call me back after, no matter what time. And Sophia? I'm proud of you. This takes incredible strength. After hanging up, I sent a text to Dr. Reynolds explaining the situation and asking if she was available for an emergency phone session. To my surprise, she responded almost immediately, and minutes later, we were speaking. What happened tonight isn't isolated, Sophia, she said after I recounted the events. It's part of a consistent pattern of emotional neglect. The question isn't whether your parents' behavior is harmful, it clearly is. The question is what boundaries you need to set for your own well-being. I think I need to cut contact completely, I said, the words both terrifying and liberating to speak aloud. At least for now. Maybe forever. That's a valid choice, Dr. Reynolds assured me. It's not about punishing them, it's about protecting yourself. You've tried addressing the issue directly, you've tried limiting contact, you've tried accepting the situation. None of those approaches have protected your emotional health. But what if I regret it? I asked, voicing my deepest fear. What if I'm being too dramatic? Boundaries can always be adjusted, she reminded me. If at some point you feel ready to re-establish limited contact on your terms, that option will still exist. Right now, you need to prioritize your healing. We spent another 30 minutes discussing practical aspects. How to communicate my decision, what to expect emotionally in the aftermath, and strategies for dealing with potential backlash from family members. By the time we ended the call, I felt centered and resolved. I looked at the clock, 1:55 a.m. 5 minutes until the exact time I had been born 27 years ago. There seemed a poetry to choosing this moment to redefine my life on my own terms. To be reborn, in a way. I opened my laptop and began composing an email to my parents. I was tempted to pour out years of hurt and resentment, to enumerate every slight and disparity, to make them understand exactly why I was making this choice. But Dr. Reynolds' words echoed in my mind, this isn't about making them see or changing them. This is about taking care of yourself. So I kept it simple and direct. Dear Mom and Dad. After much reflection, I'd decided to take a step back from our relationship. The consistent disparity in how you treat Megan and me has become too painful to ignore, and last night's celebration made it abundantly clear that this dynamic will not change. I'm not writing this to hurt you or to elicit promises of change. I'm writing to inform you that I need space and time without contact to heal from years of feeling unseen and unvalued in our family. Please do not attempt to contact me through any means. If and when I'm ready to reconsider this boundary, I will reach out. Sophia. I wrote a similar, shorter message to Megan, acknowledging that while our relationship dynamic wasn't entirely her fault, I needed space from all family connections to truly heal. Next, I drafted messages to several extended family members who I was close to, explaining my decision in broad terms and asking them to respect my boundaries by not passing messages between me and my parents or attempting to fix the situation. I set up email filters to automatically archive any messages from my parents or Megan, created a folder for family-related emails that I could choose to review when I felt emotionally prepared, and updated my phone settings to send their calls directly to voicemail. Finally, I logged into social media and adjusted privacy settings, removing my parents and sister from being able to see my posts or contact me through those platforms. As I worked methodically through these steps, I felt a strange mix of emotions: grief for the family relationship I had always wanted but never had, fear about moving forward without the safety net of family, however flawed it might be, but predominantly, an overwhelming sense of relief and rightness. At precisely 2 a.m., I hit send on all the emails, blocked their numbers on my phone, and finalized the social media changes. It was done. I had set a boundary that honored my worth, even if my family never would. Within minutes, my phone lit up with notifications, extended family members responding to my message. One aunt expressed support, sharing that she had always seen the favoritism but hadn't known how to address it. An uncle wrote simply, "I understand. Take care of yourself first." My grandmother, however, sent a message asking me to reconsider, stating that family is family and suggesting I was being too sensitive. These responses reinforced the rightness of my decision. The people who truly cared about my well-being supported my choice to protect myself, while those who prioritized the appearance of family harmony over actual emotional health tried to pull me back into the dysfunctional system. I turned off my phone, closed my laptop, and lay back on the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt unburdened by the constant need to prove my worth to people who couldn't or wouldn't see it. Tomorrow I would fly back to San Francisco, back to the life I had built for myself, surrounded by people who valued me exactly as I was. There would be challenges ahead, I knew: grief, doubt, pressure from well-meaning family members to reconcile, but in this moment, at 2:07 a.m. on my 27th birthday, I had given myself the gift my parents never could: permission to be worthy without their validation. I slept deeply for the first time in years. I woke the next morning with a strange sense of lightness, as though I'd put down a heavy backpack I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was there. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if I'd dreamt sending the emails and making the blocks, but a quick check of my phone confirmed reality: several more messages from extended family, but nothing from my parents or Megan that had broken through my newly established boundaries. As I packed my few belongings and checked out of the hotel, I braced myself for a wave of regret or second-guessing that never came. Instead, I felt strangely calm, almost detached, as though I was observing my actions from a slight distance. The airport was quiet for a Sunday morning. I changed my flight to an earlier one without difficulty and spent the extra time before boarding writing in my journal, documenting my feelings and reaffirming my decision. Dr. Reynolds had suggested this practice as a way to strengthen my resolve during the inevitable difficult moments that would come. Once on the plane, I turned my phone to airplane mode, symbolically cutting the last potential connection to my family until I reached San Francisco. The physical distance felt important, a reinforcement of the emotional boundaries I'd established. Ashley was waiting at arrivals, her familiar face a beacon of warmth in the crowded terminal. She wrapped me in a tight hug without saying anything, then took my bag and led me to her car. "How are you feeling?" she asked once we were driving toward Oakland. "Numb, mostly," I admitted. "But certain. It's the right decision." "Damn right it is," she agreed. "I ordered your favorite Thai food for dinner, and I picked up ice cream. We can talk, not talk, watch movies, whatever you need." This simple act of consideration, remembering my favorite comfort food without being asked, highlighted everything that had been missing from my family relationships. At our apartment, Ashley had cleaned and put fresh flowers in my room, small touches that said, "You matter," without words. I unpacked my suitcase, changed into comfortable clothes, and joined her in our small living room, where dinner was already set out. "Any messages?" she asked, passing me the pad thai. "A few from extended family." "Nothing from my parents or Megan yet," I said, checking my separate folder for family emails. "Either they haven't seen the messages or they're respecting my boundaries for now." "Or they're plotting their response," Ashley suggested, always the pragmatist. She was right. Around 9 that evening, my phone lit up with a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, and seconds later, the notification appeared. "It's my mother," I said, staring at the phone. "She's calling from a different number to get around the block." "You don't have to listen to it," Ashley reminded me. I know, but I should. I steeled myself and played the voicemail on speaker so Ashley could hear too. Sophia, this is your mother. Her voice was tight with controlled emotion. I don't understand what this email is about. If you're upset about something, we should discuss it as a family, not with these dramatic gestures. Your father and I are very concerned. Please call us back immediately. No acknowledgement of my feelings. No reflection on their behavior. Just concern about my dramatic gesture and a demand for immediate contact on their terms. It was so predictable I almost laughed. Wow, Ashley said, raising her eyebrows. That's some world-class missing the point. A text came through from the same number. This is your father. Your mother is very upset. Whatever issue you're having, cutting off contact is not the mature way to handle it. Call us. Again, no consideration for why I might have made this choice, just judgment and demands. I blocked the new number without responding and turned back to Ashley. And that's exactly why I needed to do this. They can't even hear me when I'm explicitly telling them why I'm hurt. The next wave came around midnight, emails from various family members saying my parents had reached out to them, concerned about my mental state and asking them to convince me to call home. They're pulling out the flying monkeys, I murmured, using the term Dr. Reynolds had taught me for family members enlisted to do the bidding of those I'd set boundaries with. I responded to each with a brief, firm message. I appreciate your concern, but this is between my parents and me. I've made my decision after years of consideration, and I ask that you respect my boundaries. Most backed off, but my grandmother persisted, calling repeatedly until I had to block her number as well. A painful step I hadn't anticipated having to take. By morning, they had escalated further. My mother had somehow gotten hold of Ashley's number and called her at work. She wanted me to tell you that you're breaking your father's heart and that if you'd just call, they could fix whatever misunderstanding has occurred, Ashley reported during her lunch break. I told her I wasn't getting involved and that she should respect your wishes. I'm sorry they're dragging you into this, I said, feeling guilty. Don't be. I've wanted to tell them off for years, Ashley replied with a grim satisfaction. It actually felt pretty good to set a boundary with them myself. The next attempt came through my workplace. I received an email from our office manager saying my mother had called claiming a family emergency and needed to reach me urgently. I told her company policy prevents me from confirming or denying employee information and suggested she try your personal contact methods, the manager wrote. Is everything okay? Do you need any support? I was mortified but also touched by my colleague's concern. I thanked her for her discretion and briefly explained I was establishing boundaries with difficult family members. To my surprise, she immediately understood. Been there, she wrote back. Let me know if they persist, and we'll figure out a strategy. Through all these attempts, I held firm. I didn't respond directly to any contact from my parents or Megan, didn't engage with their escalating tactics, and maintained my boundaries despite the guilt and doubt their messages tried to instill. What surprised me most during this time was the unexpected support that emerged. An uncle I'd always been fond of but never particularly close to sent me a long email sharing his own observations of how I'd been treated over the years. I've watched your parents favor your sister since you were both children, he wrote. I never said anything because it wasn't my place, but I've always seen your worth, Sophia. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. Whatever you need to heal, including this distance, is valid. His validation brought tears to my eyes, not because I needed external confirmation of my experience, but because it was healing to know someone in the family had seen the truth all along. 3 days after my 2 a.m. decision, the attempts at contact suddenly stopped. The silence was almost more unnerving than the barrage had been. I found myself checking my phone more frequently, wondering what they were planning next. Maybe they're finally respecting your boundary, Ashley suggested as we made dinner together. Or they're regrouping, I countered, still on edge. I was right. The following day, a large bouquet arrived at my office with a card that read simply, "We need to talk. Love, Mom and Dad." I donated the flowers to the office reception area without reading the card aloud to anyone. That evening, a package arrived at our apartment, a small jewelry box containing a pair of sapphire earrings and another note, "Please call us. We can fix this." I returned the package unopened with "return to sender" written across it. The message was clear: they were trying to buy my reconnection. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of material disparity between how they treated Megan and me, they thought gifts would bridge the gap they had created. A week after my decision, Dr. Reynolds and I had a regular session where we processed what had happened. "They're following a predictable pattern," she explained. "First denial, then anger, then attempts to manipulate through third parties, then bargaining with gifts. When none of those work, they'll likely move into a period of silence before trying again with a different approach." "What should I expect next?" I asked. "Often, the next phase is a more direct guilt trip, claims of health issues exacerbated by your absence, references to their aging and limited time left, or dramatic statements about family loyalty." Sure enough, 10 days after my boundary setting, an email slipped through my filters with the subject line, "Your father's health." My mother claimed that my father's blood pressure had spiked dangerously due to stress over my abandonment and implied that any further health complications would essentially be my fault. I forwarded the email to Dr. Reynolds, who helped me see it for what it was: emotional blackmail, an attempt to make me responsible for my father's well-being when they had shown so little concern for mine. "Your father is a physician with access to excellent healthcare," she reminded me. "His health is his responsibility, not yours. This is a manipulation tactic, not a reason to break your boundary." With her support, I maintained my resolve, even as the guilt threatened to overwhelm me. I reminded myself daily that I wasn't cutting contact to punish them, but to protect myself while I healed from years of emotional neglect. 2 weeks in, I was surprised to receive an email from Megan, the first direct contact from her since my boundary setting. Unlike my parents' messages, hers seemed genuinely confused. "I don't understand what's happening," she wrote. "Mom and Dad are upset all the time, and they won't tell me exactly what's going on. Did I do something wrong? Why are you angry at me too?" Her message gave me pause. Was I being unfair to Megan? After all, she hadn't created the family dynamic, even if she had benefited from it. I brought this question to my next therapy session. "Megan was a child when this pattern was established, just as you were," Dr. Reynolds acknowledged. "But as adults, we become responsible for our participation in harmful dynamics. Has Megan ever acknowledged the disparity in how you were treated? Has she ever used her privileged position in the family to advocate for you?" I thought about it honestly. No. When I've tried to discuss it, she dismisses it as me being too sensitive, just like our parents do. "Then your boundary with her is also valid, at least for now," Dr. Reynolds assured me. "You can always reassess individual relationships within your family as you heal." I sent Megan a brief, kind response explaining that I wasn't angry at her specifically but needed space from our family dynamic as a whole. I suggested that if she wanted to understand more, she might reflect on the differences in how we'd been treated throughout our lives. I didn't expect a revelation or apology, but at least I'd planted a seed of awareness. As the weeks turned into a month, the intensity of the contact attempts gradually decreased. My parents seemed to realize that their usual tactics weren't working, though occasional messages still came through new channels: a card sent to my office, an email from a newly created address, a message passed through a distant relative. Each time, I maintained my boundary calmly and consistently. And each time, it became a little easier to do so, a little clearer that I was making the right choice for my well-being. The most unexpected development came nearly 5 weeks after my decision, when I received a message from my uncle, the one who had supported my boundary from the beginning. "I had dinner with your parents last night," he wrote. "They're still upset and confused, but for the first time, your father asked me why you might have felt the need to cut contact so completely." It wasn't a genuine reflection yet, more bewilderment, but it's the first crack I've seen in their certainty that this is all coming from nowhere. "I didn't betray your confidence, just suggested they might consider how their treatment of you and Megan has differed over the years. I don't know if anything will come of it, but I thought you'd want to know. This message didn't change my resolve, but it did offer a small comfort, the possibility that perhaps, in my absence, some small seed of self-reflection might be taking root in my parents. Whether that ever bloomed into genuine understanding and change wasn't something I could control, nor was it my responsibility to nurture. My focus remained on building my life on my own terms, with people who valued me completely and consistently. By the 6-week mark, I had settled into a new normal. The emotional storms triggered by each contact attempt had lessened, and I found myself thinking about my family less often, focusing instead on my work, friendships, and personal growth. The boundary I'd set at 2 a.m. on my birthday had created space for me to finally breathe, to exist without the constant weight of seeking approval that would never come. I wasn't naive enough to think the story was over. There would be more attempts at contact, more emotional hurdles to clear. But I had taken the hardest step, choosing myself when no one else would, and each day that passed confirmed the rightness of that choice. The first week without contact had been a roller coaster, moments of liberation followed by crushing waves of guilt and doubt. But as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, those waves became less frequent and less overwhelming. My parents' attempts to reach me continued but became more sporadic. They tried various approaches, from angry demands to tearful pleas, from enlistment of relatives to material enticements, but I held firm to my boundaries, neither engaging directly nor allowing their efforts to pull me back into the old dynamic. 3 months after my decision, I faced my first major test, my cousin Julia's wedding. I had always been close with Julia and didn't want to miss her special day, but I knew my parents and Megan would be there. After careful consideration and discussions with Dr. Reynolds, I decided to attend with clear boundaries in place. I'll be at the ceremony and reception, but I need you to understand that I'm not ready to interact with my parents or sister, I explained to Julia during a phone call. To my relief, she was completely supportive. I get it, Sophia. I'll make sure you're seated at a different table, and I'll run interference if needed. I just want you there. The wedding itself was a masterclass in boundary enforcement. I arrived just before the ceremony began and sat in the back row, slipping out briefly during the family photos and returning for the reception. When I inevitably crossed paths with my parents, I gave a polite nod and moved in another direction. They looked older somehow, my father's face more aligned, my mother's smile strained, but they respected the physical distance I maintained. Megan attempted to approach me once, but Ashley, who had come as my support person, smoothly intercepted her with a glass of champagne and a question about her dress, allowing me to slip away to another conversation. You did great, Ashley said as we drove home afterward. How are you feeling? Stronger than I expected, I admitted. Seeing them didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. It just felt distant. Like they're characters in a story I used to know well but have outgrown. That distance was healing, a sign that the emotional hooks my family had in me were loosening their grip. As I continued therapy, Dr. Reynolds helped me understand that what I was experiencing was a necessary grief process, mourning not just the loss of current family relationships, but the loss of the family I had always wanted but never had. You're grieving an illusion, she explained during a breakthrough session 6 months after my decision. The loving, supportive parents who valued you equally. The sister who could be a true friend. You're letting go of the hope that they could become those people if you just tried hard enough, achieved enough, gave enough. That realization was both painful and liberating. I was finally accepting reality instead of clinging to a fantasy that had caused me years of pain. With that acceptance came a deeper healing, a genuine release from the cycle of hope and disappointment that had defined my family relationships for so long. I found additional support in a group for adult children of emotionally neglectful parents. Hearing others share experiences so similar to mine reinforced that I wasn't oversensitive or demanding too much. I had simply been asking for the basic consideration and equal treatment that every child deserves. The hardest part was accepting that I didn't do anything to deserve being the less than child, shared one woman during a particularly powerful meeting. It wasn't about me at all. It was about their own issues and limitations. Her words resonated deeply, helping me finally internalize what my therapist had been telling me for years. My parents' treatment of me reflected their deficiencies, not mine. I had always been worthy of love and celebration, they simply hadn't been capable of providing it equally. As I approached the one-year anniversary of my decision, I planned a celebration with my chosen family, Ashley, Jordan, Zach, and several other close friends who had supported me throughout this journey. We rented a beach house for a weekend, cooking meals together, taking long walks along the shore, and sharing stories around a bonfire. "I want to toast Sophia," Ashley said, raising her glass as we watched the sunset from the deck. "1 year ago, you chose yourself when no one else would. You showed incredible courage, and we're all so proud of you." Tears pricked my eyes as everyone clinked glasses. "Thank you all for showing me what real family looks like," I said. "For celebrating my wins, supporting me through losses, and loving me without conditions or comparisons." That weekend marked a turning point in my healing journey. I was no longer defining myself by what I'd left behind, but by what I was building, a life filled with genuine connections and mutual respect. My career continued to flourish without the weight of seeking parental approval. I took risks I might not have before, including accepting a challenging new position that required relocation to Seattle. The old Sophia might have hesitated, worried about moving farther from her family despite their treatment of her. The new Sophia recognized that geographical distance was just a detail when emotional distance was already in place. In Seattle, I met Ryan, a graphic designer whose quiet confidence and genuine interest in others immediately drew me in. Our relationship developed slowly, built on a foundation of honest communication and mutual respect. When I eventually shared my family history and current boundaries, his response was everything I needed. "Thank you for trusting me with that," he said simply. "I think it shows incredible strength to prioritize your well-being that way. Whatever support you need around this, I'm here." No judgment, no pressure to reconcile, just acceptance and support. It was a stark contrast to previous relationships where partners had insisted that family is everything or pressured me to make peace regardless of the cost to my mental health. 15 months after my 2 a.m. decision, an unexpected package arrived at my new Seattle apartment. The return address was Megan's, not my parents'. I let it sit unopened for several days, unsure whether to maintain my boundary or make an exception. After discussing it with Dr. Reynolds, whom I now saw via video sessions, I decided to open it cautiously. Inside was a small box and a handwritten letter. "Dear Sophia," it began. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about what you said in your email last year, about reflecting on the differences in how we were treated. At first, I was defensive and didn't want to see it. But the more I thought about specific moments from our childhood and beyond, the more I realized you were right. The BMW birthday was just the most extreme example of something that had been happening our whole lives. I'm sorry I never acknowledged it before. I'm sorry I benefited from it without ever standing up for you. I'm not asking you to forgive me or to reconnect with our parents. I just wanted you to know that I see it now, and I'm doing work in therapy to understand my role in all of it. If you ever want to talk, I'm here, but I'll respect your boundaries either way. Love, Megan." Inside the small box was a photo I'd never seen before, the two of us as small children, maybe 4 and 1, sitting together on a swing, my arm protectively around her shoulders. On the back, Megan had written, "We were sisters before we were roles in a dysfunctional system." I sat with the letter and photo for a long time, emotions swirling. This was the first genuine acknowledgement from any family member of the reality I had experienced for so many years. It didn't erase the past, but it offered something I hadn't expected, validation from someone who had been inside the same system, seeing it from the other side. After careful consideration, I sent Megan a brief email thanking her for the letter and photo. I explained that while I wasn't ready for regular contact, I appreciated her reflection and honesty. It was a small opening, not a full reconciliation, but it felt right for where I was in my healing journey. 2 years after setting my boundary, I achieved a milestone that felt symbolically important. I bought myself a car. Not a BMW, a practical, reliable hybrid that fit my needs perfectly. As I signed the paperwork, I thought about the contrast between this purchase and the BMW that had been the final catalyst for my decision. This car represented independence, self-sufficiency, and choices made for my own well-being, not a gift designed to highlight disparities or create obligations. That same week, I received another email from my parents, the first direct contact attempt in several months. The tone was different from their earlier messages, less demanding and more reflective. "Dear Sophia," they wrote. "As your absence from our lives approaches the 2-year mark, we've been doing a lot of thinking about why you felt the need to cut contact so completely. We won't pretend to understand everything, but conversations with your uncle and some honest reflection have made us realize that there may have been patterns in our family that hurt you. We're trying to learn and understand. If you're ever ready to have a conversation, we're here. With love, Mom and Dad." It wasn't a full acknowledgement of the specific behaviors that had driven me away, nor did it contain a direct apology, but it was the first indication that they might be capable of self-reflection. I shared it with Dr. Reynolds in our next session. "This represents growth on their part," she observed. "But the question isn't whether they've changed, it's whether you want contact with them in your life right now, and if so, what kind of boundaries would make that contact healthy for you?" I considered the question carefully over the following weeks. The truth was, I had built a fulfilling life without my parents in it. I had genuine connections, work I found meaningful, and a hard-won sense of self-worth that no longer depended on their validation. Reintroducing contact would involve risk, the risk that old patterns might re-emerge, that their growth might prove superficial, that I might find myself slipping back into the role of the less valued daughter. After much reflection, I composed a response that honored both their effort and my boundaries. "Thank you for your email and for the reflection it represents. I'm not ready for direct contact or conversation yet, but I appreciate the acknowledgement that patterns in our family were hurtful to me. My decision to establish distance wasn't made lightly, and my healing process continues to require that distance for now. I wish you well, Sophia." It was neither a rejection nor an invitation, but an honest statement of where I stood. I didn't know if reconciliation would ever be possible or desirable, and I had learned not to make decisions based on obligation or others' expectations. For now, the boundary I had set at 2 a.m. 2 years earlier remained necessary and healthy. What surprised me most about this journey was how the absence of toxic relationships created space for nurturing ones to flourish. My circle of friends had deepened and expanded. My relationship with Ryan had grown into a partnership built on mutual respect and genuine appreciation. My work had become more fulfilling as I pursued paths that resonated with my authentic self rather than seeking external validation. Most importantly, my relationship with myself had transformed. The inner critic that had constantly questioned my worth, internalized from years of being the less favored child, had quieted. In its place was a stronger voice that recognized my inherent value, independent of achievements or others' approval. 3 years after that pivotal birthday, I sat on the balcony of my Seattle apartment, watching the sunset over Puget Sound. Ryan was inside making dinner, and our friends would be arriving soon to celebrate my 30th birthday, a simple gathering of people who genuinely celebrated my existence. I thought about the journey from that hotel room at 2 a.m., when I had finally chosen myself, to this moment of genuine contentment. The path hadn't been smooth or painless, but each step had led me closer to a truth I now held with certainty. I deserved to be valued, to be seen, to be celebrated, not because of what I achieved or provided to others, but simply because I existed. The BMW with its red bow had been a turning point, not because of the material disparity it represented, but because it had finally made visible the emotional disparity I had lived with for so long. The $2 hadn't been the insult. It had been the clarifying moment, the permission I needed to walk away from a situation that had been slowly diminishing me for years. Real family, I had learned, wasn't defined by blood or obligation. It was created through consistent acts of love, respect, and genuine celebration of each other's unique worth. Sometimes that family included biological relatives, sometimes it didn't. What mattered was the quality of the connection, not the nature of the relationship. As Ryan called me in for dinner and I saw the smiling faces of friends arriving with small, thoughtful gifts and genuine delight at celebrating me, I felt profound gratitude for the difficult but necessary choice I had made 3 years earlier. By walking away from those who couldn't value me, I had created space for those who could, including, most importantly, myself. The greatest gift I ever gave myself wasn't anything material, it was the permission to be valued, to be seen, and to walk away from those who couldn't offer that basic respect. Sometimes leaving at 2 a.m. is just the beginning of finally arriving where you were meant to be all along. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to prioritize your own well-being over family expectations? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary for genuine healing and growth. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that they deserve to be valued too. Thank you for witnessing my journey, and I wish you the courage to honor your own worth, whatever that looks like for you.